This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today's subject is Masterful Integrity. So I know I can be masterful about a few things, and I have integrity. So maybe I know what this is about, and maybe I don't.
Well, let's find out. So
Okay.
what do you think integrity is?
Um, Well, for me, integrity, it starts with being honest with myself and being um, honest and non-judgmental to others.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to talk about today comes from the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. I'm not going through all of them, but so I've skipped one or two. And this is number 6 commitment.
Okay.
The title of the chapter is Practicing Integrity. And basically, we've already learned a bunch of things from that book. And I feel that some of these commitments are useful, not just in the context of where we are leaders of others, but where we are leaders of our own life, how we lead our own life.
Okay.
So in the book, they say that I commit to the masterful practice of integrity, including acknowledging all authentic feelings, expressing the unarguable truth, keeping my agreements, and taking 100% responsibility. That's above the line representation of integrity.
Okay.
Below the line, and we've talked about above the line, below the line. So above the line is where we're open and curious and approach everything as a learning opportunity. Below the line is where we're defensive, blaming, and feel victimized.
Right.
Okay, so integrity in the context of below the line is I commit to living in completion by withholding my truth, denying my feelings, not keeping my agreements, and not taking 100% responsibility. And so the authors, Detmer, Chapman, and Klemp, have a different definition of integrity, although it comes full circle around to what you were saying. So their definition of integrity is not just doing the right thing or conforming to moral and ethical standards, but facilitating the flow of energy. So how does that resonate for you?
Well, first of all, being above the line there and being honest with yourself and bringing that information forward. To me, it's like you're not telling other people how to live. You're not saying that you are better than them, but it's being comfortable in your own skin and sharing.
Yeah, so not being a moral snob or in judgment of others.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
And so they also talk about it's a natural state of wholeness with unbroken flow of energy where we're alive, engaged, passionate, relaxed, and refreshed. And there's a congruence, meaning that we're matching our inside with what is on the outside, and we're aligned with our life purpose. So that inside and outside, they give an example of one of the executives in a company that they were contracting with, and he was having an affair with his secretary. He was married, but having an affair with his secretary, and he's espousing all of these values in conscious leadership, buying into the story, but he was not living in integrity because everybody knew about it, but everybody was pretending they didn't know about it.
Right.
Those things happen. And stepping around outside of the elephant. And so in terms of the flow of energy, it would go to a certain point and then everybody would, they stop and don't say what they need to say, which gets back to one of the prior commitments, candor, the one we did the last time. So in terms of the natural state of wholeness with unbroken flow of energy, where we're alive, engaged, passionate, relaxed, and refreshed, when was the last time you saw that in your life?
Wow. I try to be there all the time, but obviously I'm not. Um, but for instance, today at work, um, I had two of the people that I was working with, they're really burned out. And so when customers are coming in and asking questions that they've felt are redundant, um, their demeanor was, they didn't want to really help. They were rolling their eyes. They would whisper things to me like, oh, these are the type of customers we get all the time now. And yet I looked at it differently. Um, I was open to hearing what they were asking for and um, trying to answer their questions as best that I could without coming across as being a know-it-all, even though I'm supposed to be the expert in the field. Um, and I could feel that the energy of these other two people were, even though it was negative, it was pushing me to be more positive.
Hmm.
And so I was, I didn't even feel like I was working harder. I just felt like I was following what I thought was natural, was what was needed at the moment. And probably today was one of the first days that I walked out of my 4-hour shift feeling not encumbered by a lot of the stuff that had happened. Um, and a lot of times I'll walk out of there feeling like, you know, um, I didn't answer somebody properly because I either didn't understand them and they couldn't make themselves understandable, or I actually probably came across as um, a snob and not responding as professionally as I should have.
So today you felt that you did hit the marks. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
to me, that sounds like you may have felt wholeness with an unbroken flow of that aliveness, engagement, passion, relaxed, and refreshed.
Right. And I've been writing a lot about that in my daily blogs because I'm trying to be, I'm trying not to judge people as I used to believe that they judged me, if that makes any sense. It's like, you know, if I told somebody I didn't feel well, I could, I thought I could read their mind saying, oh, this is just an excuse. And so, because I thought that's what they were saying about me, I started getting negative feelings towards others when they would say things. And now it's like I'm trying to drop all that and just go with it. If somebody says something, follow through on it.
So taking it at face value.
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel?
Um, Less burdened. It's like previously I felt like I was carrying everybody else's thoughts and comments on my shoulders and that I had to do something with it. And now I don't have to do something with it, but if I can, then I will go with it. If not, I can just remain calm and quiet.
So you have more autonomy. I mean, you're in the driver's seat. You get to choose,
Yes, absolutely.
and it's powerful to be able to choose.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, they talk about integrity breaches that it's anything that blocks the flow of energy, that inside outness congruence or the alignment with life purpose. And they tell us that integrity breaches are the #1 cause of employee disengagement. And so how do you think that relates to those coworkers?
Well, in the past, if I would have heard their negative comments, I would have probably absorbed it and then um, sort of followed in that same direction, which would have made me unsuccessful in what I'm supposed to do. But again, it would have added their thoughts and their burden on top of my shoulders because, hey, if they're feeling that way, I guess I should feel that way too. And when you tend to think for yourself, you don't have to follow the crowd. Um, you don't have to put that extra weight on yourself.
And when you're thinking for yourself, you're anchoring to your own values.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, they tell us there are 4 pillars of integrity, and they actually get this from Gay and Kathleen Hendricks, the very well-known people in the psychosocial world and so on. And the Hendricks tell us the 4 pillars are: 1, take 100% responsibility. So if you recall, that was commitment #1 in the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. Speak authentically. That was commitment 4. I skipped that one. We talked about candor, but
Right.
I skipped #4. I think it was 4. Feel our feelings through to completion. So that was feel our feelings in commitment 3 that we did cover. And then impeccable agreements. So what do you think that might mean? I love that word.
Well, impeccable to me refers to perfect. Um, and I don't like the word perfect, to be honest with you, because I don't think any of us are. I remember once hearing Bill Gates said, not even God is perfect. So why are we striving to be perfect? Um, so um, I don't even know what to think about that.
Okay, so their idea of it is an impeccable agreement is one where anything you said you will do, about anything you said you will do, or anything you have said you won't do. Okay, so they are clear about it. And it's between 2 or more people. And one of those people, you can be both. So you can be making an agreement to yourself. So it's you and yourself. And they can be big or small. And just as an offside, the idea is that we have, it's not literal, but a metaphor is we have like a data box, like the black box in airplanes that they get to analyze when a plane has crashed or something like that. Well, our brains can operate the same way. So the data we're giving it, whether we're adhering to habits or not, that's all getting programmed. So the more from a neuroscience perspective, and this is an oversimplification, if there's anybody from the neuroscience world possibly listening, I recognize that it's a total simplification of these very complex concepts. But the idea is as we are either keeping our habits or breaking our habits, it's all being recorded in our brain. And to the extent we give our brain clean data and adhere to the habits that we've identified we want to adhere to, then we're not giving it junk data, which can be deviated from. Okay, so the agreement's very similar to this, that we basically say we do what we say we will do when we said we would do it. All right, and they make a distinction, an agreement versus a commitment. So a commitment is just a general direction we're going in. It isn't necessarily between you and someone else. It's just you and the universe. So you're either going towards it or away from it. Whereas an agreement is something you've said you will do and or something you said you won't do. And when I was reading the book, I totally got it's something you said you will do, but it didn't rise to my conscious brain that it's also something I said I wouldn't do, even though that's more or less obvious.
Right. Well, I can think of a lot of things that, I've thought to myself that I will not do. And then I find myself doing it. And it's like, wait a second, like, where did that come from? Um, but sometimes it's because of habit. Um, and I don't care what anybody says, habits are very difficult to break. It's not that we can't, but we have to be conscious of breaking them. And we don't walk around all day long being totally conscious of everything we say and do. At least I don't think.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
impossibility, I think. Yeah, we have to go into automatic pilot from time to time.
right. I
So
mean, I
they,
can
they
think of
talk
some,
about 4 practices for impeccable agreements. And one is making clear agreements, being precise about what we will do and by when. And that's like a formal contract in some ways, but it can be in our verbal agreements. But to be more conscious and precise about what we're doing and when we're doing it. And then clarity about that everybody is fully committed to keeping that agreement. And I just have to tell you, I had an experience at the end of November. It was just before Thanksgiving. And I was working with somebody in this group, and this guy sent me something he had prepared kind of out of the blue. It was, a tangential thing having to do with what this group was, this committee. And I looked at it and I realized, oh, gee, wasn't the direction we were going in with this committee. And then the holidays hit and I had all sorts of client matters to handle, and I had some family matters from out of state, and it was just getting caught up in the undertow of life. So I get on the other side of the holidays and I sent an email to him saying, I got caught up in the undertow of life, checking in with you and so on. And he sent me a scathing email saying, I was relying on you getting back to me and you didn't. And I assumed that you were brushing me off. The last thing that I intended. Okay. So, the door was closed to me. That was it. And I felt terrible about it. But in going over this material, I see the error of my ways. I should have been more precise, but I didn't realize we were in that kind of arrangement with each other, that kind of relationship with each other. I had not asked for this item he had sent to me. I did look at it, but I from my perspective and remembering all the other commitments, being open and curious and not trying to be right, I really went through all of those commitments, and I'm still unsettled about it in terms of agreement. But it was a good lesson for me to be more intentional and more clear about what I'm agreeing to take on and not agreeing to take on, because clearly I hurt his feelings. He took it personally, and that was the last thing I would have intended.
well, and as I listen to that, um, I think it flows both ways. Okay. Um, maybe you should have responded earlier, but that's really not the point. The point I really think is, you know, being open to that conversation when you finally had it to say, hey, I'm sorry. I got, involved in other things. Didn't mean to put this off, but, now I can respond. I think we have to be more open that, you know, people make mistakes either intentionally or they make mistakes unintentionally, which was what you did. Okay. should you have been more open and responsive? Possibly, but we can't be 100% for everybody. And
Not
I,
100% all of the time.
right. And I see this happening, sometimes, I'll send out something to a client and I don't get a response, and I'll follow through, and if I still don't get a response, I'll wait maybe an extra week. Okay. Because maybe they did get involved in something. And this just happened to me in the past 2 weeks. I had an agent who contacted us and wanted to know if we would like his client on one of our podcast shows. And I could think of two where this person would have been a perfect guest. So I wrote back and I sent them all the information, and he wrote me back and he said, "Oh, we'd love to be on both of those shows." So then I sent him the information when. In the first show, the person didn't call in, never confirmed. Um, and my reaction could have been, you know, getting angry. Hey, you set this up and, you didn't show up. But instead, I did a follow up, still didn't get an answer. But finally, yesterday, I got a response. And as it turns out, the person who was contacting me got COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know in the back of my mind, anything could have happened. All right.
Right.
And yes, I felt, when we went to do the podcast at night and we didn't have the guest, we didn't start recording. And finally, the host of the show said, "Do you mind if we don't record tonight? Because I was all prepared to have this guest on." And I said, "Totally get it. We'll reschedule." And I could have been upset with the podcast host. I could have been upset with
Mhm.
the guy who was arranging it. But the things that I'm learning is that, where's that going to get me? If I get angry at the podcast host, it wasn't her fault. Okay. And as it turns out, it wasn't the guest's fault either. Somebody got ill. Um, so I hope this person who you're referring to will soften up and talk to you, and, you know,
Well, we did have another exchange after that. I sent back another note and I said, I have to tell you, this is what occurred. And I apologize, 100%, et cetera, et cetera. I had no intention of hurting your feelings. And I, apologize for that as well. So he wrote back and said he forgave me, but, there's still an impasse there. But the beauty of having gone through this work is I can remain open and curious rather than handling it the way I would have handled it before, which would have colored the whole thing and not have landed me where I feel I am now.
right,
Because I'm only responsible for my part. I can only go so far. I can't reach into the TV screen and rearrange how he's going to behave. And
exactly.
maybe he will respond, maybe he won't. But I'm very conscious of how these things apply.
And I'm becoming more aware of it myself. Um, and I've been talking about a lot of this in my blogs because I've realized how it has changed me. Um, and again, when I said before, it's difficult to change habits. It is, but certain ones, when you are conscious of how it affects you, um, and how it affects your relationship with other people, when you start working at it to make those corrections, it's such a relief. It's like, why am I getting angry? I don't need to get angry.
Right.
Um,
Yes. Yes. It's a freedom. It's a
yep,
form of freedom.
absolutely.
So just to sum up some of this, they talk about 4 practices for impeccable agreements. So one is making clear agreements, being precise about what you will do and when you will do it. Clarity that everybody's committed to the same thing. So we kind of covered that. And most people make agreements that they don't really ever think that they'll be called on to complete. I've
Right.
never done anything like that. And they use the phrase, they say yes to things that are not whole body yeses. And a friend of mine shared with me years ago, if it isn't 100% yes, then it's a no. And I've been guilty of saying yes to please and, a whole host of reasons. Seems like a good idea at the time. But they say, this is, was such a profound sentence in the book for me. Keep track of all of the agreements you make. If life is more complicated than a Bedouin sheep herder's life, then you need to keep track of them. So in essence, keep an inventory of your agreements. Isn't that a novel concept?
Yeah.
If I did that, I would have pages upon pages of things. Many of them just to myself, but nonetheless.
Well, it's funny. Years ago, when they came out with those big daytimers that a lot of us carried,
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I used to put all those notes in there, almost like this, well, I'm going here, I'm going there, all my agreements. And I do that on my calendar when I'm scheduling, shows or meetings. And usually what I'll put in there is if there's an attachment from an email or something that somebody has sent me that says, yes, I definitely will be there, or this is the number you can reach me at. And it's funny how my husband is totally the opposite. Uh, you know, he'll remember everything in his head, but it's not written down. And what he remembers in his head doesn't always totally correlate to the person or the subject. Um,
You
and
mean he cross-pollinates them or something?
yes, exactly. And, he'll be sharing something with me and I'll go, no, that didn't happen in November and it didn't happen with that client, but it happened because I write down his notes because I know he's gonna talk about it or need it. And he'll go, well, how did you know that? Well, because when it first happened, I noted it. So um, my problem is though that I don't always go back and look at these agreements um, that I have there, and so that can get me into trouble too. So
Mm. Well, it was a sobering moment for me that I have to keep an inventory because I do take on a lot and sometimes I forget what I've taken on. So just a couple of other things, renegotiating agreements when we've broken them and what, it's changing the scope of what you may have agreed to, the due date of what you may have agreed to. And again, when these are agreements with ourselves, we're not necessarily being that precise, but the whole idea is to be more precise so we can clean those things up. But and I've heard of this before, but it didn't resonate as deeply for me. When we're cleaning up a broken agreement, we should just say, I didn't keep my agreement with you, and I realize that could damage the trust we have with each other. And I want to know if there's anything I can do to repair that. No excuses. It's just the, bald statement that I didn't keep the agreement. And so it's the opposite of what I did with that guy that I just mentioned earlier. And, just a nice clean, let me clean it up, mea culpa, and so on, obviously sincere.
and sadly, so many of us, we apologize and make excuses because it just seems easier. Um, but I think what this is teaching us, it really is easier just to, a blanket statement. I made a mistake. What can I do moving forward rather than, reiterating all the things that you thought you did and wish you hadn't did.
Right. And I was slipping below the line a bit because I did feel like, how could anyone have interpreted that as an agreement, an email sent to me as my commitment to, whatever. But I caught myself in that. And so all of this in aggregate tells me I just have to be more intentional about my agreements. And I am going to do a little, like, not an Excel chart, but a list of what I've agreed to do and clean up my commitments. There's too many of them. So how might you, what stands out for you in the conversation that might be useful to you going forward?
Well, one of the things, I have to stop saying yes to everything. Um, and I've been on that path, but I'm still at that point that I'm I'm saying yes to doing things that uh, I don't want to do, and but I feel I have to, and so I need to almost make myself uh, a commitment list of these are the things that I'm willing to do, these are the things I'm not willing to do, so that I can learn to say no at the right time. Um,
And what would that do for you?
oh, it would take the pressure off, you know. And I think we've talked about this in the past, that I always wanted to please everybody, because if I pleased you and said yes, then if you're happy, well, I'm happy. And the reality of it is, it took me most of my life to figure this out. That's not the truth. Um, if I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to be as successful at it. Therefore, the outcome is not going to be as good for you and me. So, um, you know, instead of saying yes, I have to figure out what those things are that I don't want to do. Um, and what are the things that I know that even though I don't want to do them, I may have to do them. So, I mean, I basically have 3 columns, and just accept the fact that either I have to find a way to um, get through those I don't want to do things in a more positive manner, so that I can be productive.
I like that. I
So,
like
so you're teaching me a lot. Um, And I will tell you, I have people who have said to me, "Boy, you're not the same person I started working with 3 years ago." And it's like, you're, you're right. Because,
Are any of us the same person from 3 years ago?
well, I don't think we are, but I think, I've gone through just enough changes um, that I have always wanted to do, just didn't give myself the ability to do it. Okay. Um, I didn't, because I was afraid people were going to get mad at me. And
Mhm.
one of the things that this has taught me is, if somebody really wants to get mad at me, they're going to get mad at me no matter what. Okay.
Right.
It
Yes.
could be what I do, what I don't do, way I look, way I don't look. And so um, I'm, moving in that direction to say, I'm not here to upset anybody or make anybody angry with me, but I just can't be a people pleaser 24/7.
Right. You're
And
always operating in good faith,
yeah,
but yes, you can't be a people pleaser.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think you're great, and I appreciate everything you do with New Cleveland Radio. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you. And we will be back together again in 2 weeks. And again, I'm hoping that our listeners will contact us. I noticed in the past couple weeks that we've been getting more listeners. So I think that's very, very encouraging. And if you have any topics you want Candace to follow up on, please email us, and we will include you in our future shows.
Thank you very much,
Have a
Karen.
great day. Stay well.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.